Okay, so it's kind of been a while since I've last posted. That was on August 17th, and that's about a month and a half from today. Whoops. So I promised an update, and I haven't done that yet because I've been procrastinating it. Look at me. Who'd have think that someone with ADHD would procrastinate something that's uncomfortable? Definitely not me. Anyway, where have we been? Where has Levi been? Where has Steven been? Well, I don't really have the answer to that because this last month and a half has been pretty busy. And so what's been going on? That's a great question, Steven. Recently, I've not been doing great. Not at all. There's been a lot that's been going on in my life that is out of my control, and we're going to go into detail about that more throughout this little conversation, but for the people that don't feel like listening to the whole thing, that's pretty much where we're at. We should have an actual episode out, I hope by the end of this month or by the middle of this month, unless that's too ambitious then. And then disregard what I just said. Anyway, one of the things that has stopped me from posting episodes recently is that I kind of stopped believing in myself, which is a weird thing to say, but let me explain that to you or to me, because there's really no one here right now, so I'm just talking to my computer screen, which is cool. But yeah, man, I just lost my train of thought. Okay. Yeah, Levi and I spoke a lot about what works for us in terms of managing our ADHD, helping with depression, and kind of just general mental health stuff to help us. And while you're probably sitting there thinking this man is literally talking to his computer screen right now, he's probably not okay. And you're right. But also, you're probably sitting there thinking well, why would you stop believing in yourself? And part of that is I built up this image of myself, this guy that had it all figured out. This guy that, I don't know, maybe one part of that is me feeling like I'd be disappointing myself or disappointing you as a listener, because over the last 6 months, I've built this expectation of myself that I'm this perfect person, this role model for mental illness, someone that has it all figured out, and someone who can speak about what has helped him and maybe give some important people in my life advice or just guidance, I've been there, that sucks, and this is what I do. But expectations. Now, I've never had anyone say it to me that I'm expected to be perfect. It's me. I think that I should be perfect because, well, we actually have a lot of people that listen to this podcast, surprisingly. And it's challenging to even look back because it's there, the 4 months ago where I was better, and say, I'm not there anymore, and say that a lot of this stuff doesn't work or just doesn't feel right. So what has actually happened in the last month and a half? Well, yeah, bear with me if you're listening to this because I don't have a script or anything. My meds haven't kicked in and I'm all over the place. I should still do this thing because I wanted to do an update. So let's get more in depth. Let's delve into the psyche of me, the most uncomfortable place to be right now. Yeah, so over the last month and a half, I've had a lot happen to me at once that I'm not going to go too much into detail about because I'm still uncomfortable. But okay, one of the things is that I have a nice wrist injury, and that may not seem like a big deal, but it has actually impacted my life quite a bit because there's a lot of stuff that I've been having to go through with it. Like, one of the things that helped me cope was going to the gym, lifting weights, and just being in my body, you know? And I still can't really accept that right now I can't do a lot of that, but it was challenging, or it is challenging, to not be able to use my wrist as much because, well, A, I'm a student, B, I kind of need it to like edit stuff, so this is probably not going to be that well edited, and just daily lifestyle things. Besides that, it's actually given me a lot of perspective that I should have been thankful that I could use my wrist properly before. I don't know. I was kind of fine with it for a little bit, but it kind of it sank in once I moved back to the city because I was home for the summer, right? And it was move-in day, September 1st, into my apartment, and I had a lot of my friends who actually showed up, and they pretty much moved like my entire place, which I'm pretty grateful for. But as someone who likes to be independent and do it by himself, I felt powerless, and I felt like kind of a burden right now, because, you know, these people are great people, but gonna have to kind of rely on them for a little bit because physically I have not been doing great, and I can definitely see how that's taking a toll on my mental health, my ability to think, and my ability to manage myself, because I don't know if it was in that moment that I felt like I lost my sense of self, but it was definitely somewhere along the way. Once I was like moved in and stuff, I had my roommate help me with a lot of like moving around furniture, helping me build stuff, and well, again, I'm really grateful for that, but I had a lot going on before the wrist injury or during it that I honestly didn't open up about. I was relying on my friends for like physical help, and then I didn't want to like burden them with a lot that was going on in my mind, and I didn't want to admit that I wasn't actually in a place that I could pick myself up, dust myself off, and be like, I'm fine, and just start doing all those things I spoke about in season 1. There was a lot of challenges to doing that because it was difficult to cook. It was difficult to clean or buy groceries by myself. It was difficult to accept that I couldn't go to the gym, or difficult to say that I kind of needed a lot of support. And trying not to rely on that too much, because I know that there's a limit. I know that there's healthy boundaries where you can't always have people helping you out. No, it's nice to have them there, but I feel like a burden right now because I am not in a good headspace. I am not able to do what I want to do physically, and that weighs a lot on me. But what happens after that? Well, school starts, and I took this break, like whatever, because I kind of wrote in that whole paragraph that a lot of stuff was going on, which is true, yeah. But then I returned to Pure Health. I was planning on like just getting back into it. I was planning on like getting back into it and, hit the ground with my feet running. But that didn't happen because when I returned to Pure Health on, when was it? When I returned to Pure Health on like September 13th, I thought I was doing great again because I was just distracting myself. And of course I wasn't dealing with like the actual problems. And I thought like, this is fine. I'm not going through a lot. I can just keep distracting myself and it'll all go away. But surprise, surprise, that didn't happen. And when I tried to put that pressure on myself to do the podcast, I found that I couldn't. Like somewhere along the way, my spirit broke and I stopped believing in myself. And that's like, how do I say it? Two sides of the same coin or something? Because one of the reasons that I stopped believing in myself was that, well, this whole podcast thing gives me a lot of this feeling of purpose, because it's a platform where I can speak about my lived experience with mental illness and have hopefully people either educate people or make people empathize, if that's the right word, like not feel alone. But when I lost my ability to do that, that was another part that kind of made me lose this belief in myself, because I thought now like, oh, you're burdened, Stephen. And what is the point of you? Because it felt like everything I built up had just been taken away real quick, and that isn't great. School's going good. But when everything sucks and you're not okay, and you keep trying to push through it by distracting yourself, well, what does that sound like? A little bit unhealthy. But that's what I was doing. I have been distracting myself for the past month and just keep procrastinating this date to start the podcast again, to start all this stuff again, because deep down I know I want to do it right. And it feels like I've done so much wrong recently that I just don't know if I can do that. Because when there's a lot of problems that pop up in my life, I like to immediately go into solution mode. Like, okay, let's figure this out. But it was an overwhelming, or it is an overwhelming amount of stuff that I just can't do. And that's tough to say. Like, I know, okay. Okay. We're going to tie ADHD into this like little rant because I should just not be ranting on a platform about mental illness without talking about mental illness. So here we go. Okay, so prioritizing. I have this article up about prioritizing things with an ADHD brain. And I realize that one of the things that is or has been challenging with my ADHD is making things a priority. So when there's like a million, not an actual million, problems going on in my life, it is hard for me to focus on one, try and work through it, or just accept that I can't. But instead, I hyper-focus on one thing, like my wrist, and then everything else falls to the wayside. But I don't get anything done because my wrist injury really isn't in my control right now, other than like the physio that I'm doing. It's not in my control right now. But I hyper focus on it, and I spend so much time trying to figure something out, trying to fix something that I can't fix. And I don't know why. Well, I do know why. It's because it's hard for me to shift focus. Like, yeah, this article says, like, you can't do it all, which makes sense. But prioritizing things is hard because I know that if I did a lot of the small stuff, like just try and sleep a decent amount, or try and you get out of bed at a reasonable time, or eat a little bit better, exercise a little more. Okay, yeah, even me explaining that is like me trying to do it all. But what I'm saying is, like, if I could prioritize that rather than sitting there and being like, oh, this is really shitty for me right now that I can't use my wrist, or this is focusing on the fact that I've lost a lot recently, and the sense of, especially my sense of self, focusing on that rather than like things that are actually in my control is probably what's dragging me down right now. So in doing this, it's kind of me being like, hey, Steve, maybe you are doing a little bit better because you can speak to your computer, which is your audience, apparently. This has not been very helpful. I'm sorry. Okay, so I literally have an episode out and it's named Don't Blame Yourselves. Well, what have I been doing? Maybe blaming myself for procrastinating this thing, and maybe blaming myself for not having it figured out, B, not being perfect, and C, not having everything under control. And then the biggest part is just still trying not to blame myself for having legitimate issues with time management, executive function, or what have you. Still trying not to blame myself for having a mental illness. Trying not to blame the world for making it this way. It is tough. Because when something happens, you feel like, or I feel like, I have to immediately find a reason. Immediately find, like, something that gives me closure, which would be a reason. Something that makes sense. You know, like, I have ADHD and bipolar because I'm supposed to be doing this podcast. Well, okay, that makes sense to me. But then what happens when I can't do the podcast? Just another person that's chilling with ADHD and bipolar. And I guess that's okay to me. Sometimes I think, like, maybe things are just the way they are. You know, there's no reason for it. It's not like, I don't believe that I'm just here to be preaching about my mental illness or mental health. I think that not every narrative has to follow that story, that you go from someone that's suffering to someone that's teaching. Because I know that I'm someone who's suffering right now. And I can't just flip that narrative back to the person that can preach about what helps them or their experience because, well, I'm not doing okay. I'm not. But it's frustrating. It's really frustrating because I thought I was doing better. I thought I had it all figured out. I thought that for a minute that, well, not a minute, but I thought for those 4 or 5 months where I was doing the podcast consistently that this is why. And you're better, Stephen. And then it almost felt like there wasn't mental illness for a little bit. And now I can see it, and it's ugly, and it sucks. It's hard not to feel helpless when you have this big, ugly thing in your head that some days you can't do much about, and some days you can. I've not been able to control those things in my head that I used to know how to. And it sucks because it felt like for a minute that it had all went away, and that's probably where I messed up because I stopped trying to learn about ADHD. I stopped trying to learn about anxiety and bipolar disorder because I think unconsciously I thought, oh, you're cured, Stephen, because look at you. You know that scheduling works. You know that exercising and sleeping well is working for you. But then you realize that it doesn't go away, and that's tough. But maybe that's kind of what I want to do to put this in a more like positive Stephen just not ranting to himself thing, is that sometimes it feels like you have it all figured out. And that's great. But then things start to happen. It feels like all at once. And then suddenly you find yourself lost again, and you find yourself in kind of right back where you started. So maybe you start to blame yourself that it's your fault that you're back here, or you should have done better, or you need to do this, you need to do that. But maybe a little bit of it is just sitting there and recognizing that maybe you do need a little help, or you do need to take some time to do some healing. And you know what? As cheesy as that might sound, it's true. Because the world isn't built for people like us. It's not. It's hard to accept that you do have that thing that's going on that's going to be there forever. And it really, really sucks. The part of me realizes that despite the fact that I don't believe in myself anymore, I know that this isn't the worst I've ever been. This rock bottom that I feel like I'm at is actually nowhere close to where I used to be. I'm not starting over. I just got set back. And as much as that sucks, as painful as it is, it's kind of helpful to know that there is some tools that I have now, a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of whatever, that I know I can try to use. But sometimes it's okay to just sit there and be like, I can't do it. I can't. And that's what I've been doing, is just kind of sitting there for like a month and a half and looking at myself and telling myself I can't do it. So that's why I realized that I need to be in counseling again, and I need to take time off to heal and take time off to get back to a place where I feel like I'm someone who should be speaking on this podcast. But there's the expectations again. I'm not doing well. I know that. But a part of me can't accept that. And I think that's going to be one of the hardest parts about getting better right now, is being able to say that, Steve, you're 20 and you don't have it all figured out. And despite all the work that you've done to yourself, it's going to come back. But that's okay. We're going to take it one step at a time and just start to get better again, rather than looking at myself and telling myself that I can't do it. Trying something, even as small as recording this episode, it's a lot to me right now. So it's not about this idea of, I guess this is more to myself, but it's not about this idea of always being someone that people can look up to, but more like maybe perseverance is great, being able to push through challenges and just having it figured out and actually being able to do that stuff. That is amazing. But I realize that I have to forgive myself for not always being able to do that. Not getting so caught up in solution mode that I forget to acknowledge how I'm feeling. And acknowledging that maybe I can't be in solution mode right now. And I just need to sit with it for a little bit before I feel like I actually can start doing things again. So maybe it's not all about perseverance, but this understanding that we as humans are not perfect, and that even if we can solve a problem, if we know what to do, it's not always easy to do it. But that's okay. Because again, if you have a mental illness, the world isn't built for you. It doesn't seem acceptable in our society to just say like, hey, I need a break. I need to take a month off, a month and a half off, so that I can get into a place where I feel like I can work on this shit that I'm going through. It's not acceptable to say, I need time off. And I don't need to fix this problem right now because I can't. Well, how can you blame yourself for taking time off that you need? Maybe not to heal, maybe not to fix your problems, but for me, it's literally just to sit here and think. To sit with the feelings and being like, hey, this sucks. Going through a lot right now. Sitting here and being like, well, I can't fix it. I can't do it all. But one day I'm going to start to try. One day. But maybe that day isn't today. And that's okay, because mental illness doesn't have an expiry date. Or I don't know if there really is a rush to get better, but I think we're so conditioned to just do things as quickly as possible that it's hard to realize that it's not always healthy. Especially with ADHD, skipping over all the fine details like how long something is actually going to take, or how much effort, or how long it's been since you've done something. It's challenging, and I think that's why it's important to reiterate that ADHD is a disability as recognized by the government. That's pretty much where we are right now. So I know that I got really depressing in this last little bit. So I do want to end on a more positive note and say I am doing a lot better now, because this past month and a half has been challenging, but I feel like I can try to start to take those baby steps again. So for our listeners, which is you, obviously, I don't know. Yeah. If you listen to this whole thing, thank you so much. I hope you got something from it. And thanks for being patient and, I don't know, being here, listening to me, Levi, whoever comes on, speak about this stuff. I'm very grateful that I have this opportunity, and that's why I can't blow it. But at the same time, I need to take a step back for a little bit. And I hope that if you're kind of going through something where you feel like there's all this pressure and you kind of lose your sense of self in it, then I hope you're doing okay. And I hope that maybe if you are down on yourself and you can't really get back up right now, I hope that I can tell you that it's okay with some merit. And I hope that we can take these little baby steps together and maybe get back to a point where we feel like ourselves again. But remember that there is no deadline for mental illness. So, again, thanks. No idea when we'll have more episodes. Hopefully by the end of this month. Or the middle. I have no clue. But yeah, that's all for now. I might update you again, or do a little speaky thing, if I feel like it. Goodbye.